Welcome to the ISC2 Toronto chapter, where cybersecurity professionals come together to learn, connect, and grow.
Joining our chapter means joining a community of like-minded individuals dedicated to advancing the field of cybersecurity.
Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting your career, our events and resources cater to all levels of expertise.
Being part of ISC2 Toronto has helped me stay up to date with the latest trends in cybersecurity.
The networking opportunities that I've made here have been invaluable.
I've made connections that help me both professionally and personally.
From monthly meetups to special guest speakers, there's always something happening at ISC2 Toronto chapter.
Join us today.
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 Join us today and take your cybersecurity career to new heights with ISC2 Toronto chapter.
Things that I've made here have been invaluable.
I've made connections that help me both professionally and personally.
From monthly meetups to special guest speakers, there's always something happening at ISC2 Toronto chapter.
Join us today.
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 Join us today and take your cybersecurity career to new heights with ISC2 Toronto chapter.
So you do that, okay? Oh.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Kanishka Bansal. I'm the Director of Events and Strategy at IC2 Toronto chapter. And I'm so excited for everyone to be here and welcome you guys. So we are hosting this event in partnership with VSys Ontario. So we have VSys team here. And we want to thank the Google Cloud Security team for sponsoring this event so we can have the venue and food. So we have Simi from Google team here as well. And we got a fantastic evening lined up. We're going to start with a keynote presentation by Rachel, and then we're going to have an interesting panel discussion followed by 4 people, including 1 moderator. And before we dive in, I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. Very nervous, it's my first time. Okay. So we respectfully acknowledge the deep and enduring relationship that the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples across Canada with the land we all share and cherish. We express our gratitude for the opportunity to live, learn, and work on these lands. This event takes place on the traditional territories of many nations, including Mississaugas of Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and others who have called this region home for countless generations. We acknowledge their profound wisdom, culture, heritage, and dedicated stewardship of these lands. Well, thank you, everyone, and I'd like to welcome Simi here for a quick presentation.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good evening. My name is Sini. I'm a senior consultant with the Mandian team based out of Toronto here. I focus on security program assessment, cyber due diligence for M&A transactions, tabletop exercises, and incident response preparedness, amongst other things. And today I'd like to talk about our cybersecurity forecast for 2025. I know we're 3 months into the year, but some of these things were already seen in the threat landscape today. And so I have 5 minutes, so I'll quickly try to rush through what I have to say. The first forecast today is we're talking about attackers' use of AI. We've seen recent trends, recent advancements in AI, and we also seen advancements in threat intelligence, threat detection, threat response. While we've seen all of that, so attackers are also taking advantage of all of this. We've seen attackers we've seen attackers use sophisticated phishing techniques, SMS techniques as well, trying to get into environments. We've also seen attackers take advantage of deep fakes to get into environments to scam people, to do frauds as well. I don't know if you remember a popular case that happened last year where fraudster tried scammed a company for 25 million USD using AI deepfake, where they pretended to be management of the team, asking someone in the finance team to send money. And so we've seen that, and we'll continue to see that as attackers take advantage of AI and leverage these to gain access into environments. The second thing I would like to talk about is ransomware. I know we've all talked about this. We'll continue to see this. I don't think this is ending anytime soon. This is a lucrative business for cyber attackers, and so they will continue to take advantage of this. People are paying for this. Some people are not paying. People are paying just given the data extortion part of the ransomware attacks, and so we will continue to see this as well. And then finally, compromised identities and hybrid environments. As cloud companies move to the cloud, move their workloads to the cloud, this adds more risk to their environment. And so we've seen attackers also compromise identities. It's not just phishing attacks now. They are also using stolen credentials. They are also using credential stuffing to gain access into environments. And so we'll continue to see that trend. We saw this with a SaaS application last year, some popular SaaS, I won't mention the name, but we saw that last year where attackers gained into clients' environments. And so we'll continue to see this as well. Having controls in place to limit what users have access to, MFA methods, secure ones as well. Also having identity risk reviews as well, limiting what people can access within the environment will be very useful. So these are top 3 things. If you want to read more, we have a link, we have more forecasts on our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Sami. Now, I'd like to welcome Rachel, who is our keynote presentation, who's going to be delivering keynote presentation today. Come on in, Rachel.
Okay, so thank you all for coming today and for your time this evening. I know everybody's busy, so appreciate you coming today to support the chapter. Oh, hang on. Do I just forward it? Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. All right, so this is the topic for today, the entity as the new perimeter. I'm not going to be pretending to be, a super deep expert in this, but what I do hope to do is maybe give you some things to think about, maybe a new perspective. There's not a lot of things that are earth-shattering. I think one of the things that I'm going to go through is that we've been living this, actually, whether we realize it or not. This is how we've been living, especially since the pandemic. So full disclosure, there are some images that I generated using AI, and I also had to use the help of my youngest middle school child to help me because she's a much better prompt engineer than I am. So, so you'll see some AI generated images in there too. Okay, next one. And also, I have to make a disclaimer. These are my opinions and the opinions of my employer. So let's go with that. So got a full agenda. I'm going to try not to take too much time. There's a break, and then I want to give some time back to the panel that we have upcoming as well. And I want to start with a few quick definitions of, we're talking all about the same thing. Remote work, as an example, we're not talking about just working from home. For example, I work from my car. I work from the parking lot at school. I work from inside the school when I'm waiting for my kids, in the hotel, in an airplane, in the airport, right? Remote work can be anywhere. That's not your employer's physical location. Digital identity is not just a password and an account and an ID. It is really that plus a collection of other identifying attributes that make up your digital identity. And with perimeter, really it's that boundary between, you're a user now and whatever they're working with. Traditionally, we thought of it, just really the outside of the castle, right? Protecting the castle in that kind of sense. So let's go back in history a little bit, because it really was a pivotal moment for how we got to where we are today, the pandemic. So was anybody here maybe living somewhere else other than Ontario in March 2020? Maybe some people were not here. So I'm going to speak more about the Ontario experience, which was that on the 17th of March 2020, the provincial government enacted an emergency response, which was really a lockdown of non-essential businesses, and there was a lot of closures, restrictions, etc. Many of you probably remember that. Physical distancing requirements, which meant really that you could not go to the office anymore. No one could, right? Unless you had a really a frontline kind of role where that's not possible. Everybody went home to work. And also everybody was stocking up on toilet paper like there was no tomorrow. So okay, so in some cases, for some companies, this wasn't a difficult switch. And for others, it was really challenging. So what are the things that made it challenging? And you may have experiences where at your place of work, a lot of companies, even today, still rely on VPN. And some companies realized that they didn't have the capacity within their VPN to be able to have the entire workforce working remotely. So you had things where people were, shifting times that different teams worked, things like that. Sorry, thank you. Shifting when they were, managing that load until they figure out how to increase the capacity for their VPN. Other companies were different, where they were already very hybrid and they already had a remote workforce for the most part. The test was whether they had the capacity to continue that way, right? Not everybody necessarily worked through VPN. They may have just used go through the cloud for externalized services. There were even some companies where they have cloud services, but for some reason they're configured to only work through VPN or through your on-site network, right? Mysteriously, that's how it was configured. And so there's a lot of pivoting, right? A lot of things that had to change in terms of roles that we thought, oh, that could never be online only. And all of a sudden we had to figure out how to make it online only. We had to figure out how to serve our customers without seeing them physically. I work in financial services, there are things that we had to do and pivot and accelerate, things that you were planning to do to serve people remotely. Now you really had to figure it out, by the end of next week. And then you think about what was happening at home. The challenges people had at home. If you live in an apartment building, your latency for your own network, all of a sudden everybody in the building's trying to get to work remotely. And then at home, right? You have enough to work at home if it's just you, but add 3 kids and your spouse, now what, right? So a lot of things had changed. And for the companies that had an easy transition is because they had been set up for remote work, and it was just a matter of figuring out capacity if they could sustain it. So we also learned very early some disruptions and threats, often for the businesses and services that were not used to being online, schools. There were lots of news stories of Zoom bombing, people, sharing inappropriate content in the middle of a classroom setting, very upsetting things for a lot of people. And this is where you start to think about who's in your meeting, right? A lot of meetings, people didn't use codes, they shared the same code, used the same code, share, all those things. Data that you're sharing, or should you be sharing it? People getting access to things that they weren't supposed to hear about. Actually, we have a recent incident in the US of that, with Signal and somebody being added to a meeting that maybe shouldn't have been there, right? So this is still happening even today. And this has a lot to do with protecting this, this is no longer about talking about protecting your network, the outside hardened area of your corporate network. Now we're got everybody at home trying to connect in and trying to collaborate and still move forward. So this is really how we started to really think more carefully about digital identity as the new security perimeter, because the boundary was everywhere very suddenly. And truthfully, it was already, it was just, accelerated and expanded, exposure much greater. So, it was a model that we had to apply in ways that we weren't thinking about before. And I always liken this to, I work in financial services, as an example, online banking. We have to secure that really well, but we are letting in people who are our customers or members. I'm a credit union, so it's a membership, to do very sensitive things with a device that we have no control over, with an identity that we have some control over it, but we don't know a lot necessarily about the person who's coming from there. We have less control, we have less trust, right? Because we don't control that endpoint the way that we do our corporate users. So it's a very different dynamic. But if you think about it, that's really the model we're talking about when we're facing a situation where everybody's coming in from home networks or any other network that they might have to work from. That, really is the basis of the zero trust model, is that you do not assume trust anymore. Right? You don't assume trust for the people who are joining the meeting. You don't assume trust for the applications that they're logging into. This is driven now by, what does this identity get? We see it, we tag it, we apply conditional access policies as an example. Where are you coming from? What do we know the device that you're coming from? This is building the identities of that, and then based on that, we apply whether we trust it or how much we trust it. Right. I don't want to just talk, but does anybody have anything that they want to ask or add? So, happy to answer any questions in between. So, the other thing that we have to do and think about is the user experience. I think, a lot of us who work in the field, we know and have learned that when you make it really hard, people find a way around your controls, right? It's human nature to take the quickest, shortest, easiest path possible. And it's always good intention. People are really just trying to do their work, right? They're not really trying to do anything more than that. The number of people who are actually trying to do something nefarious is within your corporate environment is hopefully small. But there are things you have to think about that are just, some of them are, you always had to think about this, and some of them you had to maybe apply it in either ways that you didn't before or places that you didn't before. Strong password policies, we know that. Complexity makes a difference. Length makes a difference. You can find those charts that tell you how long it takes to crack your password, right? But there's also movement as everybody's seen toward passwordless, right? So there's a combination there. Conditional access policies, again, going back to identity as the perimeter and helping you track what other attributes you need to know about this identity to be able to know if you can trust it to access an application, to access a SharePoint. This is about your level of trust and introducing more friction when you suspect that something is different, right? Introducing even more severe friction where if you see somebody seems to be logging in from 2 different countries at the same time, right? You may have to apply containment procedures if that's what your normal process is. Multi-factor authentication, again, adding that extra friction as needed when you are not as sure, or if the resources that the person is trying to access are extra sensitive in some way. I think we've upped the ways and places that we apply MFA. Often before it was maybe for the admins, they had to do a second factor to get to the highest level accounts. But now we ask our customers, you can, even for your Gmail, you can set it up. It is so widespread now that it is commonplace. Whereas previously, it was thought to be too much friction, right? But now people are expecting it because your Gmail is asking you for second factors, so your banking should also ask you for a second factor. All right, and of course, continuous monitoring, ideally behavior-based, not just signature-based, so you see anomalous patterns, things that are different from normal. And I can't, get through a presentation without saying something about AI. This is often where AI comes into play because it can do more with lots of data compared to what a human can do. To be able to look at a human can maybe look at a day's worth of data, and AI can do weeks, months of data and see patterns that we wouldn't be able to see before. Identity governance, you still have to also, even though the identity looks like it should be able to access a certain application, what entitlements does that identity actually require or is authorized to have? Single sign-on. And these are all things that are a mix of security and balancing friction. So,
okay. There's some questions online if you want to take.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. I'll just finish with the single sign-on, which helps with reducing friction. You don't have to type a password in all the time, and also helps with your user base to remember less passwords, right? Which helps the help desk, to reset, and also prevents from writing things down on a sticky note, putting it on the computer. Right. So we have a couple of questions. What do we have?
You can take any.
I can't see them.
Do you want me to read them out?
Yeah. Okay, what cultural shifts are needed to support identity first security? An interesting question. I think the biggest cultural shift is helping the organization understand there is a human at the end of every equation. And that is where we need our employee or workforce to be vigilant, right? That's where the phishing and training testing comes in, right? So that they recognize it, because even today, the most likely point of entry is through phishing. Somebody's ID gets compromised. And one of the messages I try to share at my place of work is that it is the stranger among us. The bad actor does not actually want to be seen, right? The dramatic idea of the mysterious hacker, that you see on movies, TV, Mr. Robot, they don't want you to know they're there, right? So what they want to look like is any of us, right? Because they want to be in as long as they can to learn about what they've got to look for. Where is the treasure that they're looking for, right? So that is one of the cultural shifts, is to understand the human is still very important no matter how much technology we have.
Do you want to take more?
Sure, we can do another one. Read that.
Okay. What are some common blind spots in identity governance that you have seen in hybrid work environment?
I think a common one, and it's not necessarily related to hybrid work specifically, is the upkeep. It's, you know, the work to recertify, I'll just use that word, or you might have another word. You have to check that the access is still appropriate periodically. People change jobs, people change roles. And one of the things that tends to happen with longtime employees, they collect access. You know, you've been there 10 years, you get 10 years worth of access, because if it wasn't cleaned up, you've hung on to, you know, 5 other jobs along the way to the one that you're in your 10th year. So that's one of the blind spots I feel like it happens. It doesn't have to be the cybersecurity team that does it. It can be self-managed and with oversight. That's the governance part, to see that everybody is keeping up. But that is something that's really important, that the roles, you know, role-based access, essentially, you know, those are observed, these privileges still observed, and checking for that periodically. Good.
All right. Yeah,
Okay.
we can wait for more questions.
All right. Okay, and we spoke actually about some of these regular security training. All right, so this is something I was thinking about, because the you know, the title is the new security perimeter, and that makes it sound like it's the end of the traditional model, but I would argue that it's not. I think we just have extra work. We didn't replace work, just like we often don't replace technology. You know, in financial services, you end up with every flavor of operating system lying around still. It's hard to do away with legacy. And the end of the traditional security model, I don't think that is really true. I think no matter what footprint, and I tried to generate an image of the various size castles, because it is the, you know, the traditional castle moat, gate, wall kind of thinking, where you have multiple layers of defense in depth, whatever it is that you want to call it. It still exists in some way. You're still going to have something that you have to protect in the traditional way. It's just the change, I think, is that you don't necessarily have to let everybody in first into the castle and then scale back their access. You now can, you know, have the opportunity through identity management to provide people the resources they need to do their job cloud-based, by managing the identity profiles and only saving domain access or domain access for things that you don't want exposed outside your networks. I mean, things very sensitive, for example, or for whatever other reason, you know, resources that you're keeping tightly within your admins, for example, another one. You know, so I think we haven't really, we're not seeing the end of the traditional security model. I think we've just added, but I mean, gainful employment, right? We'll all be busy. So that's a good thing. But I think there's both. I think that's what's happened. So I don't subscribe to the fact that we just dropped that. I think that's still there. I think we still have to keep it up. But we've now added different ways of connecting, because we have different models of working. So any questions related to that one? Maybe there is.
No.
No, okay.
For that.
All right. All right. I framed this in the next 5 years, but time is, and technology is moving so much faster. I can't really predict what's happening in 5 years. But what I recognize is that even though the pandemic doesn't feel that far, it has been 5 years, right? It was 2020 March, and now we're in 2025 March, right? So time flies, and so much has changed. AI is basically mainstream now. You know, they use it in schools. And one of the things now, too, that we have to think about is there's the data side of things, but there's also, what does that identity have access to? There's unintentional and accidental. There's things you know, but, you know, one prompt might show you that somebody has access to documents that they weren't supposed to have access to, whether it's something they inherited, or it's something that wasn't cleaned up, going back to identity governance. There's a lot of that's probably going to creep up on us. The democratization of data analytics, in my world is Microsoft Fabric. But people who need to crunch data, get output and reports and analytics and insights out of it, you don't necessarily have to know Python anymore. There are ways to do it without being a developer or coder of some kind. And then there's the gig culture, right? There's a workforce, there's the fixed workforce, but increasingly there are people moving around, whether it's on contract basis or shorter work terms, because work is becoming more fluid. People are making more choices to live farther, work with companies that are more flexible or closer to home. We have people moving around a lot more than we did, for example, when I was starting my career when I had moved into financial services. It's very typical for somebody to be there 35 years, right? That's becoming less the norm. It has become less the norm. Bring your own device. We've been living with that for a while as well. We'll be on the pandemic, and that will continue to see that. So, I do see that increased reliance on the identity management and understanding who is connecting to your applications, to your network, seeing your data, what documents they have, the third parties that you collaborate with as well is another one. Going back to meetings, they might be a trusted partner, but does that mean they're supposed to be in every meeting? Recycling meetings is an example of how you end up with people in your meeting that weren't supposed to be there. Simple things like that, which really amounts to basic hygiene, basic awareness that you have to check still, like before. You have to check those reply alls. You have to check the distribution list, because it comes down to who's joining. So the key takeaways that I wanted to leave you with is that identity as the additional perimeter, as I was saying, I don't think it's a replacement. I think it's an and. Because I do see that the castle still exists. We still have to provide the protection to our corporate network, even if we're reducing how many people directly connect to it. We still have one. And then knowing what those identities are doing, this is probably the work that we have to do to understand based on the patterns of behavior, because things are changing so rapidly. Being able to monitor what's happening both with the identities, with the data, the content that we have out there, as well as what's happening within our network. I think those are the key things I want to leave you with, which, while they're not surprising, it's one of those things that in concept is simple, but often hard to do. So thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
So we do have some questions on our Slido, but I want to give a chance to anybody in this room who wants to ask any questions. I'm just going to break.
I think that was a very insightful talk. I do have one question. Now with Google coming up with Google partnership and China also they're partnerships, and they're known to break encryption very quickly. Then what is the computers being used to track these improvements? And how maybe I see that as one of the that's in the next early years. It's like who gets access to those security chips and devices, and the encryption. I don't know what be the future of the encryption field in the algorithms structured infrastructure.
That's a tough one to answer. It is fair to say that once that hits, I guess, a commercial level, that we actually see the impact we'll have to make some shifts. And there is already, a lot of companies are thinking about this, and the cryptographers, are warning everybody about this as well. I think this is where I could see, despite the strength of the encryption maybe being compromised, the other ways that we protect identity, the other ways that we protect our environments becomes really important too. There is quantum-resistant encryption. There are methods being developed or out there already. How we apply them commercially, that part I can't speak to, but there is, in security, I think we've learned you can't rely ever on one particular control anyway, right? So whether it's layered defenses or mitigating controls, primary controls, I think this is the approach probably that we have to look at this from. That's about as far as I can go without getting into quantum.
Thank you.
Anybody else wants to have? So Rachel, we do have some questions on the screen.
Okay, how do you think UEBA plays a role in overall security posture? So this for me, I think it plays a big role. I think that's something that, and I think that's where also the strength of AI probably can come in and help us more, finding those strange patterns that a human can't detect because the AI can crunch through so much more data than a human possibly can. I think that's probably the power that we're looking for, so that we can spot those things much sooner, and see where our risks are much faster, and hopefully, put in the mitigated controls much more quickly than we can. Which I think also plays into how we might save resources. In the absence of more data, we end up having to try and protect everything the same way. That's a lot of the approach of trying to prioritize. It's hard. There are things that we know as humans that prioritize because it's really important to our business. But then what gets us is the things that we're not looking after, the side channels and the weaker spots that somebody finds a way to travel through the side up to the crown jewels. So finding those patterns is probably going to be very key.
So Rachel, we'll do one more question.
A non-cyber skill that's made me better at my job. I would say that is being able to communicate and translate technical knowledge into business speak, being able to show what the value is of the thing that you are trying to do. There's a security value, but what is the value that it brings to the business, and really understanding that. And one of the best ways to do that is to learn about the business you're working in, right? Understand what's important to your stakeholders so that you can address their concerns and not just your own. Because it has to be a team approach. It has to serve the business as well. Although in cybersecurity, we are trying to secure our environment, we're trying to secure our business. The business also has to grow, right? If it doesn't grow, then we don't exist. They don't need us anymore. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. So we're just going to do a quick break, and we're going to reconnect at 6:54. We're going to start our panel discussion at 6:55. There are refreshments, so please feel free to have them, and there will be some time at the end of the session to do networking as well, but feel free to mingle and chat. Faculty of Animation Arts and Design. So we have a lot of creative genes in our students and in our DNA. But I guess a little bit of background is before I joined Sheridan, so I've been around in the cybersecurity world for about 20 years. I've been around with the Big Four, with the four Big Four, so I've kind of done a lot of consulting engagements before I moved to industry. And actually, before I moved to Canada, which was about 5 years ago, I spent about 10 years in the States as well, doing a lot of work for the financial services companies and technology companies. And right now, in terms of the current role, yes, title is that of the CISO,
but I manage all things outside of cybersecurity, privacy, regulatory compliance, data governance, and definitely today AI governance as well. I do manage, pockets of OT, IoT security, crisis management and emergency response, and areas like that. Again, higher education leading teams, so you kind of wear a lot of hats. So very happy to be here and to be able to talk about this exciting topic today.
Hi everyone, my name is Marilena. I'm the Director of Customer Success at a Toronto-based startup for cybersecurity called Protexa. I don't know if anyone's heard of us. That's great. In my past life, I was also working for the Big Four in cybersecurity consulting, strategy and governance. And in my past life before that, I was a risk analyst with the banks doing regulatory compliance and risk management. So it's lovely to be here and I can't wait to have this discussion.
Hey everyone, my name is Shaunna. I'm super excited to be here. So right now I'm doing cybersecurity for the University of Michigan. I've been around a long since 20 years actually. Makes me pretty old. 25 years now in cybersecurity, and so I've had experience in the retail space, finance space, fintech space, tech consulting, some independent consulting, and everything from policy to security operations to governance compliance, privacy, and all things in between. So really happy to be here today.
Fantastic. I think this is going to be really exciting. The cybersecurity has historically been on the field. Priya, what challenges did you face when starting your career? And did you encounter imposter syndrome and how did you navigate it? It's a lengthy question.
Yeah, that is quite a loaded question. So I'll say, for me, my path into cybersecurity was not linear. So I started my career, and yes, this is going to date me as well. So I started my career as an engineer, and my first role was that as a software developer, I guess like most Indians, right? My first role was as a software developer. I did that for about 4 years. And then two things dawned on me. One was that I didn't want to do coding and testing for the rest of my life. So I wanted out. That's that. However, I did want to retain my focus on technology, right? I had the grounding in terms of, understanding how code is developed, how the underlying technology is architected. So I'm like, okay, let me use this foundational knowledge and try to challenge myself to become a subject matter expert professional in another facet of technology. So that's what prompted me to move into technology risk. The other aspect that dawned on me was that using my focus on technology, I want to move more into the management and business side of things, right? American dream in my mind was that in the Western world, my assumption was that it is a completely merit-based society, right? Bias does not prevail. It is solely merit that will take you, right? Or that will help you scale up the corporate ladder. So with this assumption, I kind of moved lock, stock, and barrel in 2014 to the US, initially the Bay Area, San Francisco. And boy, was I surprised, right? That it was not the same. So that's when I was like, okay, so now I see it's not the same. I'm kind of, seeing the reality here. So that really provided me the impetus to kind of, really double down and go in all the way to be able to change things. Now, I do want to clarify something. I'm not advocating for quotas, right? I think that merit should prevail regardless of bias, right? Whether it's, men or women, people from different backgrounds. But then I believe equity is that everyone has different strengths to bring to the table, right? So I kind of really value that. So to answer your question, Rohini, my path was not linear and my assumption was kind of corrected when I moved to the Western world. And that's why I'm very passionate about this topic, right? In terms of, in terms of really changing the mindset and culture to let's focus on the merit and qualities, right? That you bring to the table, so that you have more well-rounded perspective in not only cybersecurity, but I guess it's relatable to other fields as well. Yeah, and I guess, sorry, I didn't answer the second part of your question, imposter syndrome. So I would be lying if I said that I have not felt that. I'd say this, regardless of levels. Yes, I feel imposter syndrome a few days, even right now. Oh, is it? Okay. Oh, sorry, I keep moving around a lot. So let me stay disciplined. Yeah, so imposter syndrome, yes, I do. I have felt it in the past. I've experienced it, and there are a couple of days I feel it too. But I guess some of the things I do to kind of overcome that is the first thing is talk to your inner circle, right? Talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to your trusted peers. Sometimes knowing that you are not the only one feeling this will give you a lot of relief, right? So that is one. Another thing that comes to mind is that don't be too hard on yourself. I know as women, inherently, the confidence runs a little lower, as a result of which we want to always get things perfect 100% of the time. It is okay to cut yourself some slack, right? So I know it's easier said than done. I know I say this, but practice what you preach doesn't always work. But I guess going back, right? Don't push yourself too hard and practice compassion with yourself, right? Imagine if a friend was going through imposter syndrome and he or she is talking about the experience, you're going to sound encouraging and compassionate, right? Do that to yourself as well. That's that. And then I do have two other points. The third point is that I would say have a sense of, to be able to build confidence and have a sense of progress that you're moving somewhere, set very realistic goals and timelines, right? Realistic goals and timelines. That's one. And also embrace continuous learning, right? Like knowledge is power, like for a reason. Like, of course, tune into the latest news, and with respect to AI, definitely make sure you're caught up. So knowing that you're moving the needle will also bolster kind of your confidence. The last point I leave you with is that all this you do to be compassionate to yourself, but then it's important to not stay complacent and move, right? So always talk to you again, your trusted your inner circle in terms of them giving you constructive feedback so you can continuously learn. So I guess, yeah, that's what I'll leave you with. I know, loaded question, I gave you a very long answer.
So really loaded answer, but I think very precious points. Thank you so much. So Shaunna, coming to you. So mentorship has been a key factor in the growth of many successful cybersecurity professionals. Who were your mentors, and how did they influence your leadership journey?
I also wanted to talk on the first topic, but I'll hold my comments because I do have a really great article that I would encourage everyone to read on the male dominance and the bias in the workplace.
You have to tell us.
I will.
Yes.
Well, okay. It's from the Harvard Business Review, and it was just released this month, actually just a few weeks back, How Women Can Win in the Workplace. And it talks about educational parity. We achieved it 40 years ago. And then some really great tips on how women can achieve in any field, not just cyber or technology. So I can share that later on. Yeah, so mentorship. I'm a big believer in mentorship. In fact, so my role in WISIS, Women in Cybersecurity Global, I've been doing it for about 5 years now. But even prior to that, I can think back into my early days. I worked for Canadian Tire. I was in IT there for about 15 years. And I'm proud to say that I actually started the very first women's networking forum then, when there wasn't really a lot of talk about mentorship. But what I'll say about mentorship is, there's the traditional model where it's sort of a mentor that perhaps is more seasoned, more experienced, and then the mentee, so that one-on-one relationship. But mentorship comes in many different forms. It can come in group form, it can come in peer form, it can come in that traditional one-on-one community mentorship. But I like to say there's three things that I think about when I think about mentorship. The three C's and the 3 A's. The 3 C's are when you're entering into any kind of a mentorship relationship, make sure that you're really clear on what your goals are. So what are your aspirations? What is it that you want out of the relationship? And by the way, it's a reciprocal relationship most of the time. So be really clear on the goals. What are the boundaries, especially as it relates to professional boundaries? So if you're mentoring or have a mentee relationship in the same organization, make sure you're establishing boundaries, right? Clear communication, right? Make sure that you're really honest, authentic, transparent, to create that trust, right? Because it has to feel good. You have to feel good about the relationships that you're in when you're mentoring, and there has to be a trust there. And then make sure that you're actually committing, right? Like, don't just say, yeah, let's meet every month, and then just don't show up. It's really important, because if you say that you're going to be there in either role, make sure that you're there and that you're there fully. And then the 3 A's I would say are try to stay analytical, right? Sometimes it's difficult to separate emotion, especially when you're in challenging situations, but try to stay analytical, present facts and data to try to get some guidance. Make sure, again, you're authentic, but also that you are actively listening. I think that's a really important trait, no matter what role we play in society, whether it's with our family or our kids, our parents, professional relationships. Active listening to me means it's about 100% about what the other person's saying, instead of me spinning and thinking about what's the next thing I need to say, or I've got a really good response and I'm not really 100% listening. Try really hard in these relationships to really give it 100%, really listen to what that person's saying. It's super important. So yeah, and actually there's mentorship software out there, programs. There's free places that you can join to get guidance, hints, and tips. So I would highly recommend, if you don't have a mentor. I have one. I've had one pretty much my whole career. Any advice that I've gotten, and mostly from men, by the way, I will say, probably because I'm in a field that's dominated by a lot of males, but they've been fantastic, right? The other thing I'll say is, give your mentees really practical advice in terms of, and try not to make it too unattainable, right? Like, make it practical, make it real, and make it relevant. So yeah, that's all I have to say about mentorship right now.
Active listening and being analytical, I think, really important. So Marilena, so as we know, diversity in teams fosters innovation. How do you believe women bring unique perspectives to cybersecurity, and what role does this play in driving new ideas?
Thank you. Great question. So I'm very blessed to work for not one, but 2 startups in cybersecurity. My last startup was Elevate Security, acquired by Mimecast. I don't know if any of you have Mimecast at your companies, and the scorecard. It's an adorable little dinosaur that rates your cybersecurity. So that was I was at Elevate Security, but still a startup. That was a female-founded company, co-founded. My current startup that I'm employed by is Protexa, also a female-founded cybersecurity company. So really blessed that I've had the opportunity to work for these already super innovative, super interesting companies. I think where we can see diversity coming into it, and women's perspective, yes, but I also really want to focus on diversity here, is cybersecurity cannot be an IT-only discipline. We need people who have a risk brain and soft skills and different backgrounds, audit. We need everyone from all different walks of life. So when I was at Deloitte, one of the partners that I worked for was a woman who did healthcare law and professional studies, and she's now a privacy and cybersecurity professional. So we're talking different. My last startup founder was at Salesforce, transitioned into a CEO. My current founder is, she was in financial services for like 20 years. Now she's a software startup CEO. So what I really want to focus on is diversity of thought. Priya's story is a great one, like engineering and then consulting. And now she's, heading cybersecurity. We need diversity in thought, because
Unfortunately, technology and IT alone is not going to solve our cybersecurity problems. Rachel mentioned in the last talk, we need human protection. Human attack surface is our biggest attack surface. We need to train people on culture, thinking cyber. So what I would say is innovation is going to come from welcoming different perspectives. IT is no longer like the single path to success in cyber. You want to equip your teams with all different perspectives, backgrounds, and that's really the only way you're going to get to protect from different angles, because you can't just do it all. Technology is not going to solve 100% of or protect 100% of our systems. We need diversity of thought. We need to be creative. Someone else I was chatting to at the break mentioned being agile. Things can change on a whim and you need to just pivot. So you want so many people on your team who can do different things. So that's what I would say. And innovation, just really quickly, comes from diversity of thought and being brave enough to say, I think this is going to work. So Elevate Security, now Mimecast, was the first human risk technology out there that said, I want to solve the human risk problem. And my current company also is working on the human risk problem. Who's working on the human risk problem? Like, no one. I guess security awareness and training companies, but we can't just keep doing 1 hour of training once a year and hope that it sinks in. You got to inspire change, culture, behavior change. And I think that, that's an example of really innovative technology that, 2 female founders have brought to the industry.
So fantastic. I think we all agree here that diversity is the success, especially when it comes to innovation. And also, I think it's important for everyone to be ready for pivoting as and when it's required, not really have a fixed mindset, so as to say. Thanks so much. So Shaunna, coming to you, can you share some tips and techniques for influencing at a senior leadership level and to make an impact on the organization's security posture?
Thank you. And Rachel actually talked about some of this in her keynote as well. So I would say, absolutely, I can't emphasize enough, know the business that you're in, right? It's not good enough to just be the best cybersecurity geek in the organization. Like in all of the domains that cover cyber, you have to really understand what is the business you're in, what is the business risks that the shareholders care about, that the executives care about. What are the critical business functions? Where are your crown jewels? What's the actual risk impact if something were to happen? So talking in business language in terms that they can understand is one of the most critical things that you can do to be able to influence change in the organization. Make sure that you're getting your executive team to talk about the importance of cyber. Try to get it into performance management objectives, right? So tie it to compensation at the organizational level, put metrics in place at the individual employee level, meeting training, not clicking on phishing links, make it tied to your performance, because that's when people really start to care. So those types of things are the things that start to change culture. Make sure the business understands they're the first line of risk, right? Like the operations team, they own a huge part of risk, all types of risk, but including cyber. Then you've got your second line of defense and your third, but making sure that they understand their role in it, roles and responsibilities, team sport, like all those little cliches, right? So until you start, this has been my experience, until you start to talk in terms of business risk and impact and outage, reputational, fine, legal, regulatory, all of those things, then they start to listen. Oh, wow, never thought that it could cost my organization, X millions or thousands, whatever the number is, if we had an outage for a 48-hour period, right? So that's what starts to get people's attention, right? The other thing I'll say is don't take it personally when you do try to go and ask for funding or resources or tools, whatever it may be. If you don't get what you need, document it, accept that they have taken ownership of that, and move on to the next thing. That took me a long time to learn, so I always take it personally. Yeah, so I just want to emphasize too the importance of like the training and educational piece. Like I'm such a huge proponent for that. If you don't train the humans in your organization and make it very, very serious, you're always going to have that risk. And you know, we all know the stats, right? Human error, whether it's a phishing link, whatever it may be, a misconfigured system, that is the biggest cause of breaches in cyber. So just keep advocating for that. Like it's so important. It's in job descriptions. People are trained, they understand their role, they're measured on it. So yeah, those would be the key things I would say to influence change.
So thanks so much, Shaunna. We already agree that human element is extremely important, and also the fact that making the senior management aware and bringing the business really, making them understand. Yeah, I think those were really key, tips that you shared. Very good. So the last question that I have, which I would, request all the panelists to share. So we have some young folks here, also people who probably been in the industry, but this question will be applicable to both of them. So what advice would you give to young women who are just starting their careers in cybersecurity, or to those who are already in the industry? So I could start with Shaunna and then.
So again, getting back to that article that I just read, I really resonated with this tip is don't necessarily think that your career has to just be straight, similar to what Priya was saying, right? You can make lateral moves. Don't be afraid to make big moves and bold moves. Make sure that you're always up to speed technically, like just keep current with technology, especially as we know, quantum and AI. And reach out for those stretch assignments, put your hand up so that you can, learn new skills and get involved in new projects. And I would say just keep the community spirit going, keep networking, keep your connections live. And don't be afraid to, to enter into an area where you think, oh, I don't have the skills, or I'm like the imposter syndrome, I'm not good enough and I'll probably fail. I've learned the most in my career from the failures that I've had and from the risks that I've taken. And I'm so glad. At the time, it's scary. And you think, oh my gosh, like I ruined my career. I failed at that project. But looking back, that's when I think I had the most growth. So take chances, lean in, as they say, and rely on your support system.
Agreed with all of that. And then to add on, two small pieces of advice for those either new to cyber or growing in cyber. The first is if you are trying to break into cyber for the very first time, perhaps you're doing a career change. I also did a career change. I was in compliance in banking before I was in a cybersecurity function. I really think it's great if you can take your existing role and either pick up projects in cyber or try to transfer into a cyber department. It's much harder to be, either unemployed in the field or applying to your first cyber job without any kind of new companies don't know you. Yeah. Your existing company knows your competencies and your talents, and usually they want to see you, if you're assuming that you're doing well, they'll want to see you grow and they'll want to meet you where you are. So my best advice is if you're breaking into cyber, try to do it in your current field and then grow or pivot slowly, gently into a new role or function. And then my second piece of advice is mentorship is critical. So find yourselves a mentor, find many mentors, but I would say sponsorship might even be more important. And a sponsor is someone who advocates for you when you're not in the room. They're speaking for you. They're saying this person or this girl or this guy is the guy. That sponsorship will take you very far in your career, multiple roles, you never know. So if you don't have a sponsor, someone who's speaking for you in the room, find one, see how you can maybe take a mentorship and turn it into a sponsorship. That's really important.
So fantastic points. It looks like I don't know if I have anything more to add. Yeah, I guess in terms of my takeaways, I guess the first part of your question, Rohini, was around, how do you get into a cyber career, right? So I'll say it's okay for it not to start being with a role saying IT security analyst or a SOC analyst, right? It's totally okay that you start with a role in, say, IT service desk or help desk. Because guess what? There you're helping with setting up new accounts. You're helping with password resets, MFA resets, right? So all of that kind of, equips you with the foundational knowledge of cyber. Another example that comes to mind is that you can be a database administrator or a system administrator. There you're kind of, configuring accounts, you understand access management roles, entitlements, and areas like that. So that's kind of, some tangible examples that come to mind, right? You don't need to, for cyber, you don't need to start with a SOC analyst title. That's one. The second part that comes to mind is, I guess this is more on the characteristics, right? And I think this touches on both of your points. So have the drive and persistence, right? Like, for example, it is you that you need to own your career, right? Mentors and sponsors absolutely help you with what you need, but you need to be clear on where you want to go and what you want to achieve. So to that effect, I would say have the drive, have the persistence, and I think, back to Shaunna's point, failed so many times I can't recall, right? But then it's important to reflect on those failures, learn from every failure and pivot, right? Like the next time around, pivot, don't give up, and continue to forge ahead and push boundaries. The last piece I'll leave you with is that, and this I think is more for mid-career or senior professionals, never lose sight of how you got to where you are, right? So stay true to yourself, stay modest, and absolutely pay it forward, and be grateful to your support system and the community around you, right? We do need that kind of encouragement and vouching for each other, because again, cybersecurity is a team sport, but then for us to feel motivated, we need that sense of community. So that's what I'll leave you with.
Very great efforts from all of you. We have some questions. Looks like few of them you've already touched upon. So what does success look like for the next generation of women in cyber?
I think it goes back to something we were talking about before, which is just diversity in thought and always changing and always growing and learning. When I entered cyber many, many years ago, a mentor said that to me. They were like, if you like changing and adapting all the time and constantly evolving and having to keep up with new threats and new technologies and new everything, then cybersecurity is a great place to pivot to. I think that's still true. I think that, and it's not perhaps maybe not just for women in cyber, but in cyber period, evolving and changing and being agile and always wanting to learn, because it's going to keep changing. So just staying on top of the curve and not being afraid to try new things and learn new things.
Yeah, I think I would just say that we don't have to talk about the disparity between women and males in this space. That's what the future looks like to me. It doesn't need to be a topic. It doesn't need to be highlighted. It just is. I started out accidentally, came into the IT field as a computer operator on a mainframe, then went into networking, then got into cyber. When I first started, I got my CISSP when I was in 2005. There was no women. There's no women in the training courses. There was no women in IT in my division in technical roles. It's changed so much, and I'm so excited to see how much it's changed. And all of we have degrees now in cyber, and there's so many women now that are participating and are at the table. Even in my organization, 6 of the 8 executives are women. To your point, it's just I'm starting to see a real shift, and it's great. It should be based on skill, right? And there shouldn't be ceilings for anybody. that is considered sort of outside the norm. So that's what it looks like for me, is that we don't really need to be having these conversations about disparity, and we're all equal.
I think that's really the definition of media success. Okay. Okay, so there's one interesting one. How can allies, regardless of the gender, support more women in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I guess for allies, I know Marilena touched on mentors and sponsors, right? The differences. I guess with respect to allies, it's kind of I kind of see that as somewhere in between, right? The mentors and the sponsors, but then they're the ones. Typically, I know we say male allies, but again, regardless of what gender you're from, I think it is someone that is candid, right? Where you can absolutely be free and bounce your ideas or thoughts off of, where that person can give you your sound advice because that person understands you and understands your goals. That's one. And I think they also have a role to play, like from a sponsor standpoint, right? Like someone who can vouch for you as well when you're not in the room, but also, kind of give you that visibility to leadership or to the broader community, right? Because they're the ones that are advocating for you and vouching for you. And typically in those cases, I've kind of seen that it's more senior people, right? It is totally possible. Like, for example, for me, I've had my sponsor, my ally, and my mentor all be the same person. So again, like it can be the same person, but I guess it's the types of roles they play, right? At the end of the day, you do want someone to listen to you and be your sounding board and help you out.
Okay, so I think we can take one last question. It's probably a fun question. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about the industry overnight, what would it be? Assuming cyber industry.
Mine is really boring, and I would say it's like I'll speak specifically for Canada, some kind of a baseline regulation that we have to adhere to, right? Like Bill C-26 is like on the back burner now. And it only applies to, critical infrastructure and banking industries and, utilities and such. I was so happy to hear that the government was trying to push for some standards there, because it will make our jobs as cybersecurity professionals easier. Some may argue like regulations like GDPR and, CCPA and other ones, the pendulum swung too far. But I feel like without having the backing of some mandatory regulation, it's always going to make our job very, very difficult, very specific to how much funding does the organization have that you work for? What's their risk appetite? So unless something is mandated, we're always going to have to be advocating, pushing, influencing, having this discussion over and over again. So that's my personal perspective. I would love to have some kind of a standard regulation that's mandated for all industries.
It's very similar to what you said, which is also having a risk mindset across all businesses and practices. Having someone on the board who cares about cyber, I think would help a lot, because then right from the top, people are thinking cyber, talking cyber. So maybe my magic wand would be get someone really high up in leadership who cares about cyber risk. And honestly, you mentioned that you had a career in enterprise risk, just enterprise risk in general, but it has to include cyber, so that it's not, again, our jobs aren't so hard, and it's a lot easier to advocate for cybersecurity programs because you have leadership that sees the importance and you're not trying to persuade them that it's important.
Thank you, Marilena. Yeah, I agree with both the points. I guess, for my magic wand, what would I make that? I would love to see more collaboration across cyber professionals, across industries, and across the globe, right? That would absolutely be a game changer in my mind, because think about it, the threat actors and the hackers, they're a tight-knit community. You see a lot of collaboration on the dark web. Again, no, I'm not part of it. But then you see a lot, they are a very tight-knit community where they're sharing, their TTPs, right? Their tactics, techniques, and procedures. So I guess I want to kind of, make it easy for us as cyber defenders as well, where we're sharing a lot more threat intel and remediation. Hey, are you seeing this? I'm seeing something similar to that. So I guess, and across industries and across the globe, that would be a game changer in my mind. It'll make our jobs easier as well. Okay. Back to you.
Thank you. I guess we have time for one more question from the audience. So,
of course, great talk. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm gonna ask a question. So you had very non-linear career paths. When did you know that you needed to be done and it was time to go to the next thing? Like any tips or advice that you would say? Because I find with women, they get very emotional about certain things. Oh, I didn't get promoted. My boss didn't ask me. I had merit, but they didn't consider me. They considered someone else, etc. Like any tips or advice that you've learned along your career paths that, if I were to do this thing differently.
So the moment I knew that I was ready to switch careers was I didn't want to be promoted. I didn't want to be promoted in my current role. I saw the paths, so I could go A, B, C, and they all didn't feel like the right path. So then I was thinking about stuff. I was like, okay, I'm in this role and I don't want to keep building skills in it. So now what do I do? And it took significant networking, not just with friends who were in cybersecurity. I think I networked with like every single person I knew from high school, university, and like everywhere. And it was only a few jobs that I had friends in other careers where they seemed like interesting pivots. So I guess what I would say is trust yourself. And my transition into cyber was very slow, like years. I didn't pivot careers. The first time I thought about entering cybersecurity and when I actually entered it was years. So don't, in terms of making, maybe don't wait as long as I did, but in terms of making a decision to career change, be thoughtful, be patient, and you'll know, trust yourself.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I think I mentioned my experience, right? As a software developer, I was like, after 4 years, I'm like, okay, I don't see this is my cup of tea. I'm like, okay, I'm reaching a saturation point where I don't even feel like learning more. So I guess, that's one thing that can help you out. But I guess one of the other reasons as to why I picked cyber is that you're constantly watching the news and you're looking at the bigger picture, right, of how things are evolving. And this was when I was back in India. Cybersecurity was not a big deal in India. Even today, there's very scarce regulations, right? There's the India Data Protection Bill, but again, there's not heavy penalties like in Canada or the US. So I guess it's also important for you to understand like where the technology is going next. What do I want to immerse myself in so that when that becomes big, I'm kind of the front runners, right? So now would not be a bad time to start, really immersing yourself in, Gen AI, prompt engineering, AI ethics, and, building large language models that account for data curation, biases, and all of that. So because you always want to keep progressing, right, in your career. So I guess those are the two tips that come to mind. I think that helps.
Sure. So I have 2 points. The first is, for me, it was more the environment and the culture. If I got into it, as much as we like to say, you're sort of interviewing the company or the organization, as much as they're interviewing you, you really don't know until you're in it. And if I got in it and I didn't like it, the culture, it would not take long for me to make a move. Usually I would give it at least a year. So for me, if I felt it was not on par with, a respectful environment, a professional environment, or any of those other characteristics, I would, if it didn't pass the gut check, I would make a move. But I was also, the second point is I was very purposeful for me to get multiple industry experience. I wanted to do that by design. So that's why I've got such broad sectors before I ended up becoming a CISO, because I just felt that it would be very helpful. But not everybody has the same career path. So I would say, you know, write down the things that you really want that inspire you. Maybe reach out to a life coach or again, a mentor or somebody else that you trust and you know, think about what are the options for me? Like what sector do I want to be in? What are the growing industries, right? What are the ones that are supportive and inclusive? And so, yeah, for me, it was the culture, but also I did it by design because I was very thoughtful about what I wanted to be. And that was like the highest level in security. And, but that's not for everyone. So just trust your gut.
Okay, so thank you. This has been an incredible discussion, and I think we've all gathered really very insightful inputs from all of you. So thank you, everyone, and thanks a lot for that.
Oh, thank you.